Welcome back. The United Nations General Assembly voted overwhelmingly to end America's economic embargo on Cuba, now lasting for nearly 30 years, but the U.S., together with Brazil and Israel, have voted no.
President Donald Trump's government has begun escalating its aggression against Cuba by applying unconventional measures in order to prevent the supply of fuel to our country. Its goal, beyond disrupting the economy, is to damage Cubans' family standards of living.
It is time for the clamor of the vast majority to be heard. It unilaterally demands the immediate and definitive end to the anachronic and inhuman blockade against Cuba. It is time to put an end to double standards in international relations.
Like all nations, we get to choose which countries we trade with. This is our sovereign right. So it is worrying that the international community, in the name of protecting sovereignty, continues to challenge this right.
The resolution is not legally binding, but it follows a trend of U.S. isolation from the international community. Here's a look at this month alone. On November 1st, the General Assembly again overwhelmingly approved a draft resolution calling for a Middle East free of nuclear weapons. The U.S. and Israel voted against. A couple of days later, the organization voted on a draft resolution aimed at preventing an arms race in outer space. The U.S. and Israel also said no on that, as well as on a draft resolution calling for prevention of militarization in space. Political analyst and former UN officer Francisco Calane told us what makes Washington act this way.
They're desperate, the USA, I mean, to recover, what I call a failed primacy. I mean, they have failed because they haven't built a new world order. I mean, they have all the space of power politics on their own realm, on their own decision-making. But what they have done, wars, conflicts, disorder. I mean, not only Mr. Trump, I mean, also during Barack Obama, there was no new world order. So, after the Soviet Union collapsed, there's no world order. I mean, this is unbelievable. And the main responsibility lies on this obsession by the U.S. policy of reaffirming constantly their primacy.
A new poll in the U.S. suggests most are feeling stressed over the upcoming presidential election. In fact, it worries people almost as much as terrorism or climate change. And the main concern is that media is apparently blowing things out of proportion. Because of that, nearly 40% of people say they have now cut their news consumption.
At the same time, we're seeing democracy under threat. We're seeing state actors try to meddle in U.S. elections.
This is bad for democracy. They wanted to disrupt our democracy. They wanted to disrupt our system. They wanted us to cause doubt in our institutions and our leadership.
Donald Trump's circus has ruined our country, and our country is off the rails.
Like nothing we have ever confronted before as a nation.
Now we can binge watch the end of America.
With the increased attention, I think that news media, particularly in the United States, has given the political body, I guess you'd say. I don't think that is that notable. A certain level of stress around election time can prompt action. Everyone knows for sure there is going to be an election, and elections absolutely have consequences no matter where you live. And so if it prompts people to take action, founding fathers of the United States would say that might be a good thing, that some stress that leads to action in terms of voting would be a good thing. And so sometimes a little bit of stress around an election time that leads to action might be a productive thing.
According to the poll, many Americans feel the country is at its lowest ever point. They report mixed feelings about the nation's future, with less than 4 in 10 believing it's on an upward path. Dr. Gina Loudon again says Americans are now beginning to understand that the media are skewed in the way they present information.
There's definitely a disproportionately negative coverage of politics in the United States media. There's no question of that. I think the figure is the high 90s percentage of coverage in U.S. media is negative. And so that isn't surprising that would lead to some level of cynicism or negativity with the electorate and some level of stress, absolutely. And so, the media does bear some responsibility on the way that they present the news. The good news on that is that Americans are very aware of this in ways they didn't used to be. Americans understand that the media is very skewed and that more than 90% of the media in the United States presents the negative side of it. So Americans kind of know to look for the positive, and that's the good side. That's the good news, if you will.